Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and you're very welcome to the first live broadcast from the editor's office. My name is Justin McCarthy, and tonight we're going to be discussing the new Beef Data and Genomics Programme. I'm delighted to be joined by Brendan Gleeson from the Department of Agriculture, his colleague Gordon Conroy, Kevin Kinsley from the IFA, and Andrew Crummy from ICBF. Ladies and gentlemen, we're very keen to get your participation here tonight, and there's 4 different ways actually you can interact with us. At Farmers Journal using the on Twitter, at Farmers Journal using the hashtag BDGP, commenting on the Irish Farmers Journal Facebook page. You can text us on 086 836 6454 or by emailing beef@farmersjournal.ie, and I'll give out those details later on in the programme. Brendan, if I could go to you first, I suppose farmers have become aware of the scheme over the last few weeks, but certainly there's been a lot of work going on in the background, a lot of negotiations at Brussels and whatnot. Maybe if I could just ask you, what's the objectives of this scheme, and what changes are we likely to see, and how and what the design is designed in such a way to deliver those changes, and what are the changes?
Well, Justin, it's about the development of the beef sector, and that's something everyone around the table here has a common interest in. And it's about positioning the suckler herd as part of that dynamic. And from a public policy perspective, the Department and the Minister think that the suckler herd has a very important part to play in the production of quality Irish beef. We know that there are significant problems with poor profitability in the beef herd. We know that that is at least in part attributable to poor genetics on the maternal side. And this scheme is about addressing those weaknesses and ultimately about improving farmer profitability. Now, of course, there are other impacts also, because by improving efficiency and profitability on the beef herd, we also improve the greenhouse gas intensity of the beef sector. That's very important from a number of perspectives. Firstly, in the context of international discussions on the future of livestock industries, it's very important to position Ireland's already strong environmental credentials, but also to improve on those in the context of international debate around climate change. And secondly, of course, the fact that Ireland has a very environmentally sustainable industry, and that we are taking strides to improve it, is a key part of our marketing strategy in international markets. So for all of these reasons, this scheme is a very important step. It's about serious suckler farmers making commitments to improve their own efficiency, but also to improve the environmental sustainability of their herds.
So really it's twofold: to boost the profitability by producing more, and reducing the carbon footprint by producing more from less.
Exactly, and it addresses weaknesses that are widely accepted, and of course you don't have to rely on the department's word for that, because we have experts like Andrew Cromie, Donna Berry of Teagasc, and I know that you've written extensively on this maternal index also, Justin. So there is a difficulty there, and this scheme is intended to improve that situation.
Gordon, you've been charged with the tough task of getting this rolled out and getting it out onto farms. And maybe if I could just ask you again, there's going to be 6 key aspects of the programme. Maybe just to go through and give our viewers some more detail around what those 6 key actions actually are going to be.
Sure, Justin. As Brendan has said, it's a six-year programme, and it forms part of Ireland's £4 billion rural development programme. The scheme itself will see over 300 million paid out to participating farmers, or approximately 50 million per year. Of course, participants will be required to complete and do certain things to get that money, and really there's 6 key actions associated with the scheme, some of which farmers will be familiar with, for example, the data notifications and the genomic testing. There's some additional elements then linked
to... Gordon, the data genomic testing, that's the same as what took place last year?
That's exactly
And the recording would have been first launched under the Suckler Cow Welfare Scheme many moons back at this stage.
That's exactly it, Justin. Then there are additional measures linked to it, such as replacement of bulls and heifers, the completion of a carbon navigator in the initial year, and its updating in each of the subsequent years, and of course then a training element, the requirement to attend a training course for each participant linked to the issues and actions associated with the scheme.
Andrew, this programme is really going to shine the light on beef breeding, and I suppose here representing ICBF, it's going to put you guys centre stage now. And there has been a lot of concerns raised and whatnot over the programme. But maybe before we go into those concerns, what are we going to see? What's the difference going to be? What's this programme going to deliver in the 6 years? And we can come back then to specifics around breeding at a later stage.
The first thing, Justin, I mean, if we talk to suckler cows, what's a profitable suckler cow? And I mean, you could get into a wide-ranging debate, but the bottom line of it is suckler farmers, when you talk about the profitable suckler cow, that cow has to have milk, she has to calve herself, she has to be fertile, she has to have a decent calf. And over the last 10 or 15 years, as an industry, we've been very focused on these terminal traits. And as a consequence, we've lots of decent calves, focused on the weanling export market, the €1,000 weanling, focused on carcass weight and conformation. So we don't have a problem with the quality of the calves that we're generating from the industry. The challenge that we have is that those heifer calves that were the consequences of those breeding decisions have also come back in as the replacement females. Mm-hmm. And therein lies the challenge that the industry faces in terms of sustainability and profitability. Because as an industry, with 1 million suckler cows, we're now only generating 800,000 calves, albeit quality calves. And if we look at the potential of this programme, it is, as Brendan has alluded to refocus back on the maternal traits to ensure that farmers have a more profitable suckler cow in the future. It's driven by science. The Eurostar indexes are in place. They're well established on the terminal side. They're also now becoming well established on the replacement side. We're using a new technology, proven technology in the context of dairying, which is genomics, to really help identify more of these high profit potential suckler females at an early stage, that we can bring them into the suckler herd and that they become the replacements for the next generation, and that we improve that calves per cow per year figure from the current 0.8. And the target within the context of this scheme is to grow it within the 6 years to about 0.83. But the potential with genetics is that it's permanent, it's cumulative, it accumulates thereafter. And of course the goal is to keep improving at 0.83, 0.85, 0.9, so that we can reposition our suckler herd as a more profitable and sustainable herd in the future. And by doing that, we will also address this greenhouse gas emissions challenge that our suckler herd faces. The overall potential benefit from the scheme is about €300 million in genetic gain. That's equivalent to €10,000 per herd in the scheme.
That's 300 million per annum?
Total benefits over the 15 years in terms of the cumulative benefits from the scheme. And that presents a potential abatement in terms of CO2 emissions of about 13%. And that's back to the point that you made at the outset. It's about more from less.
Andrew, I'm just going to we have a question in here from John from Sligo. I'm breeding my own replacements, as are many farmers, and have purchased a 3-star rated bull with high reliability earlier this year. I fear that the heifer progeny of these animals will not achieve the 4 or 5-star status, and therefore essentially have to purchase a new stock bull immediately. Is he correct, first of all, in that analysis? And I suppose what are the implications there? And I suppose the high reliability around the 3-star bull is something that has concerned a lot of farmers.
Yeah. So one of the particular requirements of the scheme, and I know Gordon has alluded to them there, one of the actions is around the replacement strategy. Mm-hmm. And all of the analysis that we have undertaken has clearly indicated, that direct relationship between 4 and 5-star animals on either the replacement index or the terminal index and overall profitability. So in the context of the particular question, that 3-star bull won't qualify as part of that action. Mm-hmm. But bear in mind, he bought the bull this year. The average length of productive life of bulls on farms is about 3.5 years, 3.5 breeding seasons. The actions requirement is by 30th of June 2019. So at some point in time, that farmer will be replacing his bull, and at that stage, he will be required to either replace it with a 4 or 5-star bull, or potentially use AI.
Or he could source his heifer.
Or alternatively, of course, he can source his female replacements from elsewhere.
Gordon, if I could just nip back to you in terms of, and I think it's important maybe at the outset to get the key dates as well for the programme. Maybe just outline that to us now, so our viewers can I suppose jot them down and make sure they comply with them.
Okay, Justin, sure. The first key date, obviously, is the closing date. That's the 29th of May.
Which is next Friday.
29th of May, that's next Friday, Justin. The second thing, it's interesting to note that we have 8,000 applications received to date. They're coming in significant numbers. We expect to receive a significant number next week, and with any scheme, the closing date, schemes such as this, the vast majority of applications come in the last 2 or 3 days.
How does a farmer actually apply, Gordon? That's something we could miss. It's a fairly simple process.
I have a simple application form here. It's a one-page application form which we sent out to all beef farmers.
So that's that green form that you
exactly
have
it,
there,
Justin.
so to look out for that coming
Exactly.
in the post.
They just sign that, Justin. It's important that in doing so they've also read the help sheet that we've attached with it and the terms and conditions. But getting back to the key dates then, what we will do then, Justin, is we'll scan all of the applications received that are received in hard copy. Some of them will be received online, and we'll make approvals and issue approval letters in July, and participants then will be engaged with the scheme. And following that, we expect to make payments. The first tranche of payments will be 100% payments will be made to all participants who have complied, and that will be made in December of this year.
So payments will actually flow into farmers' accounts this year. Sign up. Just going back to the application form, Gordon. And I think this is important. What's the farmer actually signing up to when he signs the application form? Is that him suddenly signing that he's going to comply with everything for the next 6 years? And I know, Andrew, maybe you might want to comment on that in terms of your action plan for when a farmer does sign up.
Well, the first thing to note that it's an Article 28 scheme. It's an agri-environment scheme. It's part of our rural development programme. So yes, it is a 6-year scheme. But of course, farmers can withdraw before either payment issues or before they're notified of an inspection or an issue happens on farm. So they can withdraw. If they decide subsequently having submitted an application that is not for them, they can of course withdraw.
There's a lot of concern out there, Andrew, like John from Sligo, in relation to has he the bulls, will he have the bulls and whatnot, and a lot of guys, in fairness, Herd Plus has got the top tier of farmers. A lot of guys haven't been engaging with the stars. What's the ICBF plan then going to be?
The biggest question that we're getting, and we're getting about 200 calls a day, specifically on the replacement strategy, just like the caller there from Sligo. And the way we propose to respond to that is we're absolutely telling farmers to get into the scheme, apply, that they need not be worried, because their question is, is my bull compliant? Do I have enough cows? Are my replacement feeder males going to be suitable? And the big fear is they don't know, and as a consequence, they're standing off the scheme at this stage because they fear if they join the scheme, that all of a sudden they're going to be sucked into challenges and penalties, and this is it's a fear factor. And what we're saying to farmers is, look, get into the scheme with the Department of Agriculture, get into the scheme, and we will issue a statement out to the farmers within a number of weeks, and they will be able to then use that to make a final decision as to whether they proceed or not. But I'm very confident that when farmers actually see that, they won't shy away from the scheme. It was unfortunate, the example that we had, because if we look at the bulls that are on farms at the moment, and there's about 22,000 of them that are out there in the context of the 2014 programme, 75% of the bulls are compliant. So that is something that should give farmers a lot of reassurance. Similarly, when we designed the scheme with the Department of Agriculture around the female replacement strategy, we know that of the herds that were in the 2014 programme, 30% are currently compliant with the 2020 requirement, which is to have 50% 4 and 5 star replacement females.
We might just come back to the specifics around that replacement, because I think that's something that a lot of people need more detail on. Gordon, Andrew mentioned the call centre there. They're getting. I know you guys have a call centre, and actually I have the number. I should have had it. Your own call centre, 076 4423, or you can email beef schemes, that's beef schemes at agriculture.gov.ie. And Gordon, I suppose, what are the main questions you're seeing coming through on that? And are farmers annoyed when they're ringing, or is it seeking information?
That's exactly it, Justin. We're receiving up to 1,000 phone calls a day, so it's a constant stream of phone calls, and by and large the farmers are requesting and seeking information in relation to the scheme. As I mentioned, or as you mentioned earlier on, we said some of these actions they are already familiar with from old suckler cow schemes or the beef data and notification scheme, so they're familiar with some of them. So they want to know what's involved, say, with the calved Navigator, what's involved with the general training, when do I have to do it by? And by and large, once we explain what it is, farmers are then what we see making informed decisions about whether to apply or not.
Kevin, Gordon talked about the 1,000 calls. Andrew's getting 200 calls. The IFA have had, I suppose, maybe successful is the wrong word, but very well attended series of meetings, and I know you've won again tonight. What's the main concerns out there among the farmers on the ground?
Yeah, we've had 5 or 6 meetings around the country. We were in Kilkenny last night. There was 500 odd farmers in the room. We were in Tuam during the week. There was 500 or 600 in the room. We're in Coothill tonight. We'll be having a meeting in Tullamore next Monday night and in Ennis next Tuesday night again. And there's 500 or 600 farmers turning up at these meetings. There's a large level or a lot of frustration. And farmers, the specific issue, the biggest issue that they're most frustrated about is the fact that it's a 6-year contract situation. They're being asked to sign in for 6 years. And I suppose it's unfortunate, the help sheet that went out clearly specified that in that is if you don't stay in for 6 years or if you have to pull out during that 6-year period, you have to pay the money back to the department. That was a big problem. So there are other issues that has emerged as well. The 2014 reference year, not being able to increase your numbers, the 60% level of genotyping. People just don't understand that. They can't understand why they would be asked to genotype male animals because of 60%. And the stocking rate, the penalties. So in general, look at, we worked very hard to get the 52 million into this scheme. We lobbied extremely hard with yourself in the Journal, Justin. There was great support from the Journal to do it. The Minister got the money was put in place. The view out there now is it's a positive scheme. It's there to help maintain the suckler herd. People are getting it hard to get their heads around the idea that it's about carbon and about environment and greenhouse gases and all that. Suckler farmers in Sligo and Leitrim and Offaly and Laois can't get their heads around that. They see it as there to maintain the suckler cow herd. That's what the Minister originally announced it for. This carbon thing was thrown in at the end, difficult. So they see it as a positive scheme, but they feel it's too complex. They feel the bar is set too high, and they feel the costs are excessive. So we met the Minister.
If we could deal with those, Kevin, and I'll throw maybe Brendan, if I could ask you to comment on the 6-year element of the scheme, and why was it necessary to have the scheme running for 6 years?
Okay, well, this scheme is approved under a legal framework. In fact, it's the Rural Development Programme. And in order to get approval from the Commission, you have to ensure that it fits within one of the articles in the Rural Development Programme. The negotiation with the Commission was complex and intense. It's not just about the Agriculture Commissioner. We had to negotiate also with the Environmental Commissioner and with the Climate Change Commissioner. So there's an inter-service consultation in the Commission, and it requires the assent of the entire Commission for the approval of a scheme. So under Article 28 of the Rural Development Regulation, it's the agri-environment provisions fall under that. And the more traditional schemes are things like REPS, EOS, GLOS, things that people are familiar with. So this was a new innovation, if you like, not only from our perspective, but also from the perspective of the DGs and the Commission with whom we were negotiating. So it was a leap for them. But ultimately, we had a very clear objective, which was to produce a scheme which would make a real difference to suckler farmers, to the profitability of suckler farming, but also which would contribute to a positive greenhouse gas impact. And the 6-year requirement, it's clearly there in the regulation. It's a statutory requirement. It's not something that came out of nothing. And from the Commission's perspective, they see this as a commitment to a programme of agri-environment improvement, the benefits of which would be lost if people left within 6 years. But let's just turn it around for a minute. So to look at this from a positive perspective, this scheme is about providing assistance to committed suckler farmers. It's about ensuring that farmers have a payment over a full 6-year period. And there have been circumstances in the past where perhaps we were criticised for not having a kind of an ongoing programme. So that's a very significant benefit. And of course, there are provisions for force majeure situations. And equally, I think there has been a degree of misunderstanding about the penalty regime. Because
I think that's important, and we'll deal with penalties specifically, Brent. But Kevin, going back to you in terms of this 6-year, the fear is actually a farmer tying himself into something in year one with good faith, but something happening that may force a change of a circumstance?
Well, I think it's a lack of flexibility. I mean, on the one hand, farmers are listening out there to removal of milk quotas and the great increase in dairy production, and that's very positive, right? They're watching that. They're hearing about sex semen. They're seeing that there may be a greater supply and availability of calves from the dairy herd. These guys have sucklers, right? And they're looking at it, and it's costly to keep a suckler cow. They're looking at where will they be in 3 or 4 years' time when these extra calves come from the dairy herd. How will that change their dynamic? They're locked into a situation. If they have to get out for economic reasons, which force majeure doesn't cover, it's important to say that, right? They are required, as I understand it, under the terms and conditions to pay back the money. That's not acceptable, and it's too inflexible. We need more flexibility here, and as I said earlier, our president and our livestock chairman, Henry Burns, met with the minister yesterday. We put this very firmly to him across the table that he needs to look at this. He needs to try and get flexibility into this to allow producers a bit more leeway, but on 2 issues. One is on the 6-year rule, because this is different. People are saying it's an agri-environmental scheme. Fair enough, that's where it fits under the regulation. But all the agri-environmental schemes up to now have been land-based. This is now an agri-environmental scheme. It's a payment per hectare, I accept that, but it's based on cows and cow numbers. Animals are different than land. Land doesn't move, it doesn't go away. Animals change all the time. The levels of animals that we have, or the number of suckler cows, can go up or down. We're dealing, last night I met a number of farmers, excellent suckler farmers, Justin, excellent suckler farmers, who are 59, 60 years of age. They're looking at this, they have 40 suckler cows. They're saying, will I be calving 40 suckler cows in 6 years' time? That's the challenge. And what we're saying is the terms and conditions of this scheme are too inflexible. We need more flexibility to try and accommodate the hard-working suckler farmers out there that Brendan and Gordon want to get this money to. So we need more flexibility in this. And we put it to the Minister, and we're exploring issues as to how he might go back to Brussels, how can we get some flexibility in this area to try and ease that situation. People, as Andrew said, there's a genuine fear and concern. I think the Minister recognised that yesterday. He told us at the meeting that the Taoiseach had been on to him, that he had numerous calls from TDs all over the country, concerns about this. So it's not something that's just, people are negative about the scheme. Quite the contrary. People are very positive about the scheme. They want to get in, but they're looking at this and they're saying, why is this kind of almost trap here? We want to get the money. We know the 52 million is there. We know people worked hard to get that. Now, how can we get it out on farms? And I think the other thing that's scaring them a little bit is that earlier this year, you'll be aware of the fact that on the eligible land issue, people were getting letters out saying, sorry lad, you have to 2 hectares or 3 hectares, you have to pay back money from 2008. That certainly scared them. So they don't want to repeat of that. And in fairness, I think it's fair to say the Department of Agriculture don't want to repeat of that. And I'm not suggesting that for a minute. But we need to get flexibility in to deal with that issue.
I think Kevin, and we've covered it on the front page of this week's Farmers Journal, you had quite a successful meeting with the Minister yesterday. There was quite a lot of dialogue.
Well, I think he clarified what the terms and conditions were, but we need flexibility, and there's a difference between clarity and flexibility.
Well,
we need some level of change here. The Minister needs to take on board the real concerns of the farmers and deal with, 500 farmers are not turning up in Coot Hill tonight for the sake of just going to an IFA meeting. They're turning up because they want to join the scheme, but they're looking at this, and the people that have been at those meetings, I've been at every one of them out there, there is real concern out there, and we have to express that to the Minister, and we have. The Minister has indicated he's very anxious to go to some of those meetings, so hopefully he'll come to some of our meetings next week.
Brendan, just on that 6-year rule, and I accept what you're saying, there is a positive element to this as well, in terms of that it secures the money for 6 months, or 6 years, a pot of 300 million euro. But at the same time, you can see why farmers are concerned, and we've just a question in here, actually, Gordon or Brendan, maybe from Michael and Claire. And basically, if I could summarise it, it's quite a long one. He basically has it's around the land area. He basically has 20 hectares. In 3 years' time, the lease on 5 hectares, the long-term lease on 5 hectares runs out. He's going to be down to 15 hectares. He's worried about whether or not he should go into the scheme, because if he loses those 5 hectares, he just says there's a neighbouring dairy farmer very keen on it. But where's the situation there? And obviously you can see that as a very genuine concern.
Well, just to deal with Kevin's point first, and certainly we can understand why people want more flexibility with this scheme. And of course, Kevin represents the best interests of farmers, and we understand that also, and we work very closely with IFA and these things. But the reality is here that we're very much constrained by a legal framework which is quite rigid. So we've built in as much flexibility as we can to the system. It's very important, I think, and I think what emerged from yesterday's meeting was there's a degree of misunderstanding about some of the penalty regime and some of the conditions. So I think it's very important that people contact the department, read the frequently asked questions, contact the helpline and talk through these issues with the department, because I think they'll be very much, their concerns will be very much alleviated through that process. In terms of the land, there's a couple of things I think, and again, there's some misunderstanding about this, I believe. Because, and I won't deal with the individual circumstances here, but the reality is that in the vast majority of cases for suckler farmers, they will have far more land available to them than they need for the purposes of attracting the full payment under the scheme. I think that's very, very important for people to understand.
Just flesh that out a little bit more, Brendan.
So, for example, if you have a farmer with 10 animals, on the basis of average stocking rates, he probably has 20 hectares. The number of hectares he requires to attract the full payment under the scheme is 6.66 hectares. So you can see there that there's a degree of flexibility around
That's an important point, Brendan. Just because a guy has 30 hectares doesn't mean he needs to have the 30 hectares to claim the payment throughout the year. He only needs, and we'll not get into the details of coefficients, but he only needs a set amount. And I presume that can be communicated to him after the sign-up process before. A lot of that will...
He will be advised on sign-up exactly what the necessary hectarage is for the retention of the entire payment. And as I say, in the vast majority of cases, he will have more land than he needs to attract the payment. And secondly, of course, in terms of lost leases and things like that, because there may be people who started out with very high stocking rates who won't have excess land. But of course, it doesn't have to be the same land. So, I mean, the normal rules of eligibility will apply, and he may be able to attract other land.
Would losing land qualify under force majeure if a farmer in genuine long-term lease ended and he didn't get that land? Would that qualify under force majeure?
Listen, Justin, it's not normally accepted as force majeure unless it's a CPO or something like that.
Okay.
So what we want is farmers to generally, under EOS and other schemes, they ensure they have the lease for the period of the programme. Of course, that's not always possible to have a lease ending up during the middle of it. But as Brendan points out, there's absolutely no tie into the land. They can get additional land. But all force majeure applications would be examined on a case-by-case basis.
But I think it's very important, Justin, that people look, when they apply, that they look at the land they're required to keep. And I think they'll find in the vast majority of cases that they have more than enough land to attract the full payment. And I think that's a critically important part.
I think it's fair to say, Justin, the land issue is not a big issue. You know, I mean, for most guys, with the exception of a number of our top intensive suckler farmers, I have spoken to a number of them that have a problem on the land. But with the exception of those, right, and we don't exclude those, obviously, we want to be inclusive here. But for most people, the land is not the problem. The problem is the demographics of our suckler herd. We have a lot of people who are 55 years plus in this category, right? A lot of them are single guys, bachelor guys with 10 and 15 cows. And despite what people are saying, they're doing a good job suckling, right? They're doing a very good job. And bear in mind, and I heard everything that was said here tonight, but the issue in terms of the maternal breeding that those farmers have is because they were too successful on the terminal side. They took the advice that they were given by Chagas, they took the advice that were given by the department, indeed they took the advice from ICBF. They focused on the terminal side, and as a result our maternal traits have gone down. We're now trying to turn that. We want to do that. We're very involved with ICBF in terms of doing that, representing farmers. But what we're saying is we have to take that, lads, at a pace that's going to work with farmers. And the most important thing of all is we have to bring farmers with us in that process and in that journey. These are good suckler farmers, and they feel alienated here. They feel that, look, if somebody is saying to them that, yes, there's money here, right? IFA worked very hard and the Minister put the 52 million euros in place here. Now we can't get our hands on it. We can't get paid out on it. We need need more flexibility so that farmers are not getting something that's saying to them, look, if you join up here and you have to change midstream or you have to adjust, or if you reduce your numbers, you're going to have to pay back the money. That's not acceptable. We don't have that in any other schemes. We don't have that situation in any other livestock scheme, so we have to have a bit more flexibility here to deal with that.
Andrew, I'm keen, we want to get information out here to farmers on the scheme as well. And guys, just to remind you, you can interact with us at Farmers Journal using the hashtag BDGP. Comment on our Facebook page. You can text us on 086 836 6454 or by emailing beef@farmersjournal.ie. And I do have, and I will get to your questions. But Andrew, I just want to go through, Gordon talked about the 6 actions, and Gordon, feel free to come in here. Requirement 1 is calving details. There probably isn't a lot of need to go through that in detail because, as we said, that's already in train. The surveys, that's already part of what we're doing. Now, genotyping. Andrew, give us a dummy's guide to this genotyping process.
Well, the first thing I'll say in regard to the genotyping was it was a core component of the 2014 scheme, and there were 35,000 farmers involved in that scheme, and there was a lot of concern initially with the genotyping requirement in that scheme. And actually farmers, because they had a genotype in that scheme, in a typical 20 cow herd, they had to genotype 3 cows and a stock bull. So it was 4 animals that were genotyped, and we would have sent out the tissue tags. We defined the animals that we wanted genotyped. We sent out specific tissue tags for those animals, and the farmers had to tag the animals and submit the DNA or the tissue back to ICBF, and we generated the genotype. There was a very, very high level of compliance with that. So farmers actually, they understood it. They submitted the tissue. They got their payments on it. And that whole part of the 2014 scheme worked very, very well from an ICBF standpoint. I have to be, in terms of the change in this scheme, or in the new RDP programme, is that we're moving the level of genotyping from 4 animals in a 20 cow herd to 12 animals in a 20 cow herd.
That's 60%.
And well, it's moving by 4 to 12. It's 300%.
Yeah, but it's
60%.
It's 60%. I think that's about
60% of the animals are genotyped
based in the herd and cows calving down in 2014.
Absolutely. The reference year is cows calving in 2014, so that's used as the reference year. So
I don't mean to cut across, Andy, if we can just to clarify and bring that. I think the Minister clarified that yesterday, that if there was a case where cow numbers changed dramatically between 14 and 15, could a farmer, was there flexibility around which year he actually chose?
There absolutely is, and what we will do when we send out approval letters is we let farmers know both the reference area and the reference number of animals. And if there are force majeure circumstances, they apply to us, and we look at them, and they can have 2015. So that's not an issue, just.
Okay, and Andrew, just going back then to the 60%.
Going back to the specific question that Kevin has raised and has been raised consistently at all of the open farmer meetings: why the big increase in the level of genotyping? And the simple answer to that is that we moved from establishing the research and training population, which was based on these historical cows and stock bulls, to develop the genomic predictions on which the indexes will be generated, to moving to a system we have to move into operation. And operation in this context means that all of the potential replacement females that are coming into the suckler herd, we need to have them genotyped. And we need to have them genotyped because that's the way we get an accurate picture in terms of that animal's genetic merit for what drives profitability, female fertility.
So it's fast-tracking the genetic.
It's fast-tracking, and I accept, and some people have argued, well, could we not just move from 4 to 8? Why do we have to go to 12? And again, doing the sums on that, it's quite simple. I mean, in the 700,000 cows that were in the BGS, or the last year's scheme of 720,000 cows, we had 640,000 calvings, all right? Half of those are female calves. That generates 300,000 female calves coming from the suckler herd. Now, 40% of those are going to be 4 and 5 stars. That's 120,000. And it's those animals that we need to bring in as the potential replacement females. And because at the moment we're only bringing in 30,000 4 and 5 star females a year. That's our problem. And to shift that from 30,000 to a target figure which we've developed in the context of the scheme, we need to get it to 80,000. And to do that, we need some bit of margin there. And the margin is, and of course, one of the objectives of the scheme, because we do want to have it simple, this, collecting the DNA, is that we tissue tag at birth. So one of the aspects of the scheme will be we'll move, unlike last year it was cows, and this year we'll be doing some potential, but we'll move quickly to doing calves, and that will greatly simplify the tissue tagging process because they'll be tagged at birth, and that'll be returned, and from that we get the best picture of the potential replacement females to bring into the suckler herd. Because if we don't do that, this scheme will have a major challenge, and that major challenge, because if we bring it down below the 60%, then there won't be enough 4 and 5 star females, and then the market will be, it'll go through the roof for these 4 and 5s. So it's actually about getting more of these females into the system.
If I could sum it up in a very, am I being oversimplistic, Andrew, if I say that the focus of the genomics is we all have them in their herd? Jesus, if only they're all like that lady over there. Is that what we're trying to identify?
Absolutely.
What makes that lady have the calf every year, have the milk, has the lovely Charlie calf, or whatever the case may be? Are we trying to identify more of them? Is that really
the latest research, and Dunaberry Chagas has been undertaking the research with us, for a trait like female fertility, which is lowly heritable, very, very hard to look at any female, an animal, and say, will she be fertile? Having that piece of DNA is the equivalent to having 70 progeny on that animal. 70. So we moved from a single animal, and we're looking at, to actually now a cow with 1 calving, to potentially looking at a heifer replacement, potential heifer.
Before she even calves down.
Before she even calves down, that has 70 progeny. And with 70 progeny, we'll certainly know if that animal's going to be fertile or not. So that's the principle
just
of
an
genomics.
important, and I'm sure everybody around the table would agree with me. I had a farmer drop me an email today, I suppose, challenging me on some of my comments in the editorial, and he talked about how important good management was around fertility, feeding, nutrition and whatnot as well. So I don't think we can ignore that, and that's a possible one. Andrew, if I could move on then to the replacement strategy. So we're on the 4th requirement on replacement strategy. Take us through that.
So the 2 requirements, and there's a requirement around males, bulls being brought into the herd on AI on the male side, and then on the female side. The specifics around the male requirement is that on the herd by 30th of June 2019, if the farmer is using a stock bull, he must have a 4 or 5 star stock bull on either the terminal or the maternal index on a within or a crossbreed basis. Now again, what we're saying to farmers is, they don't have to get overly concerned about this as this requirement, because if we look at the bulls that are out there, 75% are currently compliant. So most farmers out there already have a compliant bull. So
75%
of the bulls that are out there on the 2014 herds are compliant, are meeting those requirements around either 4 or 5 stars on the terminal or the replacement index on either a within or on a crossbreed basis. So we're very confident that, again, there won't be a shortage of stock bulls in the context of this scheme. On the AI, the requirement is that if they're using AI, that 80% of the progeny, and the start date on AI is 30th of June 2016, 80% of the resultant progeny from AI must be from 4 or 5 star bulls as well. And again,
have the AI companies got a big enough pull of those bulls?
Again, if we look at the top 30 bulls that were used last year, they generated 200,000 odd progeny. 28 of them were compliant with the scheme. So again, the AI companies, we met with the AI companies, again, not a significant concern in the context of the operation of the scheme. The next one around the female replacement strategy is probably the one that is giving farmers more concern. And this one is because, unlike the bull, they can put the tag number onto the ICBF website, they can check its compliance. As I said at the outset, the most of the farmers that are coming in, or the calls that we're getting, they really don't know where they are. They've, like Kevin said, he has 15 good cows in Leitrim, but he really doesn't know, well, how are they going to stack up in this new maternal index? And I suppose that's the one that we're really looking to give farmers reassurance about. What we're saying is that get into the scheme, because the whole objective of the scheme is to improve those cows for you. And I suppose I'd have to be honest, and we've said that farmers are still nervous. We're still getting the calls. So what we've said in the last day or two, and with the Department of Agriculture, is we're going to provide a statement out to farmers as soon as we get all of the applications closed next Friday, and as soon as we have that, the department will generate the list of herds, it'll pass them to ICBF, and we'll generate a statement that'll give them clarity with regard to where their herd is currently. And the one thing I would really encourage farmers when they get that will provide the clarity. There's no doubt about that. But it'll also help them make a decision as to proceed with the scheme. But the scheme is designed in such a way that even that farmer in Leitrim that is, we'll say if there are 30,000 farmers in the scheme, that is in the bottom 1 or 2%, he can still be in the scheme and be compliant. But he is going to have to take a slightly different approach. He's going to have to either use AI to generate replacements, that's going to fast track the sort of replacements he needs, or he's going to have to potentially purchase in replacements.
Gordon, sorry, Andy, I want to move on to, in fairness, moving away from the breeding requirement to the Carbon Navigator. But maybe I would just ask you before, I have a question in from Sean in Tuam. I've received no application for the scheme. Where do I get one? I had 7 cows calved last year, 15 this year, and hopefully 20 next year. Will I only get paid for 7 each year, or how will that be worked out?
Well, the first one is if you haven't got a form, you should contact us, and our call centre number is 076 106 4423. That's 076 106 4423, or email us at beefschemes@agriculture.gov.ie. And I'm sorry, Justin, I was actually just looking for that number, so I missed the second question. If you just run
I had 7 cows calved last year, 15 this year, and hopefully 20 next year. So a farmer expanding, which is good to see. Will I only get paid for 7 each year, or will I get paid on the amount of cows I would have in each year in the future?
Well, the issue here is that the reference in that stage will be 7 cows. So that will be his reference going forward. So unfortunately, in situations like that, they cannot increase their
But if he could show that the reason he was 7 in the first year and 15 in the second year was because of a TB outbreak or something, does force majeure apply?
Absolutely, Justin. There are force majeure circumstances which are linked to illness or accident and so on. And it also includes disease outbreaks. So
is there anything for young farmers, Gordon? So if he was a young farmer, say this guy only took over the farm in 2004 or 2000 and where are we now, 2013 or 14, and was just investing and starting to build up, can he make a case, a special case?
Absolutely. We look at all force majeure cases on a case-by-case basis, but the first thing I would say is that young farmers will get more or less automatic entry. They'll be ranked and selected at the higher level in case of oversubscription. So
your advice to that guy would be go get his form, obviously apply, and then make a case under the force majeure for that case to be dealt with. Gordon, the Carbon Navigator, so we're on requirement 5, which is a Carbon Navigator. Just take us through that.
Yeah, listen, and we're getting a lot of questions in relation to the Carbon Navigator, what exactly is involved. The first thing to remember is that this will be completed in association with a trained advisor. We're currently in the process of running out a training programme to advisors. There are a small cohort of them already trained. We'll increase that number significantly. We'll make it available to all advisors at FETAC level 8, so all our registered FOSS advisors and so on. That will be run out. It's the Board BA Carbon Navigator. What will be required is in the initial year, or by the 31st of October 2016, they'll be required to complete that in association with an approved advisor. We'll put the list up on the website. They contact them. There's no payment from the farmer's point of view for that. And subsequently after that, Justin, they've got to update it annually. Now that's quite a simple process. They'll be trained on how to do it. The updating will basically come initially from data that will come from the ICBF, which will give them 3 of the key data points, and after that then they fill in the other 3, submit it to the ICBF, and that's the Carbon Navigator completed.
You mentioned training, Gordon, there, and obviously training is the final requirement, requirement 6. Maybe just take us through that, the whole training element, how long it will be, do farmers have to pay for it, what are the requirements on the training side? Okay,
what we will do here, and in actual fact farmers don't have to pay for it, they will actually be paid for attending it. So that part of the scheme, it's kind of it has 2 purposes. First, we want to, and we're talking about information provision, and this is very important to us right throughout the scheme. Once we get applicants into this, there will be a constant flow of information about the requirements and so on and so forth, and this is a key part of it. The first thing we'll train them on is what are the actions linked to the scheme, how can we ensure compliance to avoid penalties and so on, and that's very important. And the second element of the training will be that they will be told about what are the benefits coming from this, the benefits coming from the Carbon Navigator, the benefits coming from having 4- and 5-star animals and so on. So it's really linked to what are the economic benefits a suckler farmer will get from this scheme. And that, Justin, will be rolled out again with the requirement to complete that by the 31st of October 2016, and it's literally a 4-hour course.
And so he has the end of 2016 to actually complete.
And if I could come in there, Justin, and a key part of the training from an ICVS standpoint will be developing that specific replacement strategy for each individual herd, because within the groups of herds that are coming in, will come into the scheme, there will be herds that are already, as I said at the outset, over the compliance requirements, and actually they provide a a key resource within the scheme as well, because they're going to generate surplus female replacements that will be traded through marts and into the other herds in the schemes. And then likewise, there are going to be other herds at the other side of the continuum that are at the very, very low end, and they're going to have to develop a replacement strategy based on AI or purchasing those replacements. But it'll be very much a tailored, it's a one-on-one type discussion through a training environment. There will be that direct relationship developing that replacement strategy.
Justin, if I could just say something about the Carbon Navigator also, because it's an innovation for farmers, and it sounds pretty intangible, but there's a very tangible benefit to it. So it looks for information about things like turnout date, housing date, age at first calving, the calving rate, that kind of practical information. And it maps improvements in those metrics onto, first of all, increases in greenhouse gas emissions, but more importantly into increases in profitability. So the farmer will be able to see the development, if he improves his position on these metrics, how that will impact on his greenhouse gas emissions, but more importantly for him, on his profitability. So it's a very useful tool for farmers.
Will some of that be generated automatically, Brendan? You mentioned age of first calving. I would presume that ICBF, that's not even a requirement for the farmer.
No, it's as Gordon alluded to, we'll provide that data.
A lot of this will start.
It'll be pre-populated for some of the.
Guys, I'm just going to go to our Q&A. Guys, remember, at Farmers Journal using hashtag BDGP. Comment on our Facebook page. You can text us on 086 836 6454 or by emailing us beef@farmersjournal.ie. And I'll just take maybe some of the questions that we have coming in. Gordon, I think you've dealt with this. Will payment for the 2015 scheme be, when do you expect to pay it out? I think you mentioned that.
We'll pay that out in December of this year.
In December. Andrew, I have one here, obviously from a pedigree breeder. There's no incentive for me to bring new genetics into the country, and this is something that has actually has crossed my desk a few times. Guys that have invested a lot of money in bringing genetics in from outside of the country, they feel those bulls aren't recognised by the Eurostar index. Have you a comment on that?
I have a comment because there were effectively, if you look at the AISAR side, which is if these bulls are coming in from outside. There's 160 new bulls quoted last year, and 70% of those are compliant. If we look at the bulls that are coming in, so it's not right to say that bulls coming in from outside are not compliant, and that's even before the start of the scheme, when certainly people importing semen or bringing in bulls really weren't checking up at the indexes necessarily before they brought the bull in. The scheme will certainly change that.
So if a farmer goes to, say, England and buys a Charlie bull.
Absolutely.
Before he buys them, can he?
So we have we have a direct relationship or a direct flow of data from the two main countries that we bring data are France and the UK. So there are direct data flows that come in, and we use that in the Eurostar evaluations. And as a consequence of that, as I say, 70% of the bulls that were quoted last year are currently even
So say this farmer here that maybe, in fairness to him, he didn't engage in the Eurostar. Can he now go? Surely the stat is still here. He can
check those bulls, and if he's looking to bring in a new bull or bring in some semen, he can check in advance. So that's going to increase the level of pre-checking, and that's a positive. But even at that, look, if it's a particularly outcross bull, and traits, poledness, for example, is a trait that a lot of people are interested in now, there is an important point there. It's not to say that he can't bring in that bull, because if he's using AI, there's an 80% compliance requirement, around the use of AI. So he can still bring in that bull and use the semen and be fully compliant with the terms of the scheme. And if the bull is a very good bull, and pedigree breeders believe that this, then genomics will start to show that up. So the bull will generate, so the semen will generate a calf, and we'll generate then a Eurostar evaluation based on the genotype. And that will start to really establish if this is a good bull or not. And again, the expectation of that breeder is that he's going to be an exceptional bull. So if he is, and the genomics shows that up, then that's going to be a positive for the scheme.
Just another point in that question: does ICBF see a problem in leading the industry down a very narrow breeding line? And this is something.
No, I mean genuinely, and the one thing that again the use of DNA and genomics allows us to do is bring much more control into the breeding program. So and we have seen this in the context of the dairy breeding program, where again, using genomics, that gene pool has started to widen out as farmers get more opportunity to use even more diverse genetics. But it's because you're using the genotype that you can really start to identify these exceptional outliers with that diverse genetics as well.
Gordon, giving Andrew a rest. I'm 62 years of age and I've been trying to breed the best I can all my life. Certainly there'll be a number of our viewers, I'm sure, will subscribe to what that farmer has been doing. I love sucklers and hopefully we'll be in them in 6 years' time, health permitting. If I can no longer keep them for health reasons, will I qualify for force majeure, or maybe would I be best just to stay out?
No, listen, it's clear that a person such as this, we want these people in the scheme. He should come into the scheme, and if there are issues linked to health, as we've said already, he can notify us, withdraw from the scheme, and there will be no clawback in situations such as that of any monies paid already.
We're going to the other end of the spectrum, Gordon, and do young farmers as part of a joint herd get priority access? You mentioned earlier on that young farmers would, but if young farmers are point of a joint herd...
Yeah, our intention is absolutely that once there's a young farmer involved in the partnership, they will come in, and that will be the first.
I think, Gordon, if I'm reading this right, there's an appetite within the Department of Agriculture to make this scheme work and for it to deliver, Brendan, on the goals that you talked about earlier. And I think that's important that, again, going back to get the application in and then see the scope of the scheme in terms of being able to work it for your particular circumstances. There's going to be a level of flexibility shown there, and maybe even some common sense at times.
Listen, the first thing about the penalty schedule, this is EU money, so we're bound, as Brendan has already said, by quite a tight legislative framework. We think we have been very tolerant. We think the penalty regime is both proportionate and, as I said, has tolerances built into it. So it's not in our interests. We do not want to see a situation whereby we're writing out to any farmers looking for clawbacks or outlining reasons for penalties. Our intention here is to get the maximum number of farmers into the scheme, engage with them throughout the scheme, and pay them in a prompt fashion.
Kevin, we'll move on to penalties because it's a thornier issue. We've dealt with it with the details. And Kevin, you mentioned the meeting yesterday with Minister Coveney, and I think there was an assurance given, and correct me if I'm wrong, that around the penalties, there was a fear out there that if a farmer got a 3% penalty on his beef genomics, that it would be applied across his basic farm payment. There's some movement on that.
Well, yes, indeed, Justin. The Minister made it clear at our meeting yesterday that if the farmer has a penalty on his beef genomics scheme, and hopefully with Gordon's good help we won't have many penalties, so in the very exceptional cases where there will be a penalty, that penalty will not apply on other farm schemes like his basic payment scheme, his greening, his disadvantaged areas, his environmental scheme or whatever. So the Minister confirmed that that's the position, and certainly that had come up as a big issue at a number of meetings, and it's very positive. I would make the point, Justin, in terms of making a success of this scheme, because this is what it's all about. It's 52 million euros. It's there for farmers. We want to get it out on farmers. The measure of that success will be twofold. One is, the first measure will be how much of that 52 million is with farmers by the 20th of December this year. That's the first measure, and I'm sure the Journal will be on top of measuring that, and certainly we'll be watching it very closely. The second measure, over a period of time, is going to be how do we see the maternal end of the suckler cow improve? We have to have a measurement on that. Do we see it improve over the period of time? And the third issue that I want to bring in on this is in relation to the breeding side, that is a concern. When you work out the value of the scheme, 95 euros on the first 10 cows and 80 on the rest, and take account of genotype, it's about 72 euros a cow net. That's what it comes back at, somewhere depending on the figure, but about 72 euros a cow. The concern here is for our friend in Sligo. He has to go out and buy replacements. He has to go out and buy a bull. He's going to burn off more than the scheme is worth.
It has to
but
deliver.
He has to deliver big economic benefits on the breeding side. Okay, and we've struggled with that on beef.
And Andrew,
we've done it on the terminal side, but we've completely struggled on the maternal side.
Are you confident that will be up? Because Kevin's right. The 72 euro. What we're trying to do here, if I could paraphrase maybe, that we're trying to invest in suckling in a way that delivers greater gains in the investment, obviously. And Kevin, you're right. Farmers are going to go out there, and €72 when you're going out to buy a €1,500 replacement heifer isn't a lot of money.
Well, we know from the report that Alan Renwick did for us for the IFA 2.5 years ago, which you covered extensively, Justin. For every €1 invested in the suckler herd, it delivers €4 into the economy. We know that for every €1 that goes in terms of basic payment or in terms of the other schemes, goes directly to the farmer, right? The issue here is we're having to spend. We're having to burn up the 72 million euro, or the 72 euros, but we're also having, in cases with very good breeders and genuine suckler farmers, because of where they find themselves on the graph and the close measurement of this, they're having to spend more. It has to deliver economically back for them.
Andrew, I think this takes us nicely on to then being assured that the indexes are working. And I know there's the maternal index or the maternal herd in Grange, and obviously ICBF have a huge, very powerful database at the minute as well. Reassure farmers there now that this is going to work for them and that they're going to yield a dividend from this investment.
Okay, so the confidence, that we can take from that is, look, fortunately ICBF was established in 2000. As Kevin said, he's, IFA are involved. I mean, we're in the AI company, herd books, the recording industry are all involved within ICBF, the database, the genetic and genomic evaluations. What gives us the confidence, ultimately, in the context of this scheme and delivering the change is what has happened in Darien. So if you look at what has happened in Darien, and if you talk to dairy farmers and the success that the EBA, the Economic Breeding Index in Darien, and genomics has generated in Darien, and to really just to reflect on that, in 2005, we did not have a profitable dairy herd. The EBA was established, in 2002, and it was the exact same as what has happened, if you look at the suckler herd, an over-focus on Holsteinisation and milk throughout the 80s and 90s, female fertility went to the floor, and dairy farmers did not have profitable dairy cows going back to the early 2000s. And the EBA came in at that stage, and against a lot of people's views, because they said you can't improve milk and fertility. The two are negatively associated. You can't do it. And over the last 10 years, we've actually shown and demonstrated that to happen. And now dairy farmers do have cows with milk solids and do have fertile cows. So that tells us that biologically we can do this. You can have a profitable suckler cow that has milk, fertility, will calve herself and have a decent calf.
AI usage probably helped that in the dairy herd a little bit. But again, maybe if I could just to flesh that out in relation, you mentioned in improving the profitability. Is there an issue in suckling that we necessarily haven't established what the key profit driving traits of a suckler cow actually are? Is it how she looks? Maybe that takes priority over how functional she is in certain aspects.
Yeah, and again, therein lies one of the challenges that we have, particularly in the beef industry. Within the dairy industry, look, you'd fewer dairy farmers, you'd a high level of AI use, a level of more technical efficiency, discussion groups. One breed we were dealing with, the Holstein Friesian largely. In beef, we're dealing now in the context of this scheme, 10, 12, 15 different breeds, albeit 6 or 8 main breeds. We're dealing with smaller herd sizes. We're dealing with an older group of farmers, and as a consequence, you certainly get a wider discussion in terms of what drives profitability. But again, if we come back to the work that we've done with Teagasc, the research to establish what drives profitability, look, the key drivers at the end of the day in that suckler cow, it's milk, it's fertility, its ability to calve herself, and its ability to have a good calf. And cow size and maintenance and feed efficiency are in there as well. And those are all the attributes that we're now picking up in the context of these genetic evaluations and using genomics to start to identify more profitable suckler cows. Now, the challenge in this particular scheme will be, for a lot of the suckler farmers that come into the scheme, is the mindset change in actually that we are now starting to talk about a slightly different type of cow. It can still be a Charolais cow or a Limousin cow or whatever breed. There's good cows across all of the breeds, but it won't be this big cow with muscle, with conformation. It's going to be a slightly smaller cow within the context of that breed that has milk, that has fertility. And the focus isn't just on having a super calf, it's about having more good calves. So, and it's trying to get that mindset. But again, I come back to the training and what a key requirement the training is, because ultimately those are the messages that we have to get over in the context and give farmers the confidence. Look, even in 10 or 12 or 15 suckler cows, you have 2 or 3 of these cows in every herd, you know. Maybe they're not the flashiest cows, you know, but these are the functional cows that are actually doing it year in year. And I suppose it's really just to try and draw out and identify those cows and give farmers confidence that if we get more of those,
I'm just conscious we're coming tight for time, Andrew, and I have a few questions here that I do want to ask you. But Kevin, you want to come in?
Well,
there?
I think it's important to say that suckling is not dairying, right?
Yep.
It took 10 years on dairying. We're trying to do this in a shorter space of time on beef. The second thing is, on beef breeding, we have to understand we're breeding for both beef and we're breeding for replacement.
Yep.
On dairying, they're breeding for milk. They have AI, they get the cows in twice a day, they're measuring exactly what the production is twice a day in the bulk tank. We can't do that in a suckler herd. Let's be clear here, because there is a bit of stuff that we lecture a bit to suckler farmers and we tell them what to do and they haven't picked it up. That's not right, nor it's not fair, nor it's not an honest part of the debate. The honest part of the debate here is that if you have a 50 cow suckler herd, it's a lot more complex operation to run than a 50 cow dairy herd.
And
right?
more than likely it'll be run part-time in a lot of
It's a lot more complex and there's a lot less income out of it, right? So that's why we focused on trying to get the direct income into those herds, right, through this scheme. The frustration is that we're burning up a lot of the money in terms of the cost involved. But I do want to make the point that there's excellent suckler farmers out there. They're doing a great job in terms of breeding. It's a complex job in terms of trying to breed for beef and breed for maternal side as well, and to produce that excellent calf. Justin, I remember you ran a campaign, the €1,000 wheeling. You ran that campaign single-handedly. I did it with you around the march, and you were right. You weren't wrong. You were right. That was the right thing to do at that time, and it lifted our live exports, it lifted our suckler herd, and it lifted returns to the suckler herd. The demand has changed today, but like farmers responded to that. That was the success of that campaign. There's now a different requirement there, but I suppose part of the argument that farmers are making here, right? We can't flick a switch and just turn off all that breeding and turn it around in a couple of years. We need time to do this and we need flexibility to do this.
Andrew,
but we're very committed to doing it.
The exact same points were raised by one of our listeners or viewers. Dairy has delivered, and they're only going after one trait. In beef, we're going after more than one trait. Can this be delivered? We received no information back from the 2014 pilot scheme. Has it delivered anything? So maybe if you
on the 2014 pilot scheme, as I said, I mean that data is part of the research. So we're doing now. We got, at that stage there was 25,000 stock bulls that were genotyped, 100,000 cows. So all of that data now has come back and we're generated the genotype. So we're actually doing the research. So whenever farmers get their first evaluation or first information in the context of the new scheme,
it will be based on.
First of all, the genomic predictions are based on that data, but they will get genomic evaluations based on those.
Andrew, that's something, Kevin, and you're right, Kevin. We're trying to breed the replacement and breed the beef animal.
Beef, yeah.
Should we as an industry be the good guys that you talked about there, Kevin, that are the good guys that you talked about there are able to breed those replacements? Maybe have a cow type where they're not coming from such a low fitting. Should we be encouraging those guys to specialise in breeding replacements of a high herd health status and let the guy with 10 cows focus on the terminal traits, producing good weanlings and buy his replacements in? And I know that flies in the face of what maybe has been the advice in the past in relation to from breeding within the herd. But surely we need to start and look at that now, given that the average suckler herd in the Western Seaboard has 10 cows. Trying to get him to do both within that population it's going to be a challenge.
It is. And there's a lot of merit in that proposition, I suppose. And again, ironically, what we have evolved to, again, if I go back to the 2014 programme, about half of the replacements coming in on an annual basis are homebred, and about the other half, it's 55% are homebred, 45% are bought in. But interestingly, 80% of herds at least bring in one replacement homebred. So and therein lies
she might have been an accident, Andrew.
Well, but therein lies the challenge. You see, they're all doing a level of it. But look, I agree with you, and in many ways, the scheme acknowledges that. Those guys that want to push on and generate surplus replacements, they're going to be able to do that, and those replacements will come into the suckler herd, and they'll ultimately find their way as replacements into those other herds.
Guys, I've been bombarded with questions, Andrew. A lot of what you said has created a little bit of a stir with our Q&A, and I'm just conscious of time, and there is a few other areas of the scheme I just want to cover. Just not to have them all negative, one positive comment on Twitter. The problem up to now is the lack of info out there with farmers. Once the terms and conditions are analysed, it's not really that hard to comply, so it's not all criticism out there. Kevin, where do we go from here? And I suppose to start and wrap up, I would think that you would be advising farmers to get in, to sign up at the very least and see where they are.
Just from the very first day that the IFA went about getting a suckler payment for suckler farmers, and we worked, as I said earlier, very hard to get this 52 million in place. There was a lot of resistance to it, but we got it right through the Rural Development Programme. It's there in place now. We want suckler farmers to participate in this scheme. We want them to apply. We want to get the money out, and we will measure it in terms of how much goes out by Christmas. So I think certainly we want suckler farmers to look at the scheme, to make their own decision. We're not going to tell them where you should or shouldn't apply. We want them to partake in the program. We want to draw down the money. That's why it's there. We are absolutely committed to getting this money out to suckler farmers. I think to try and we have to deal with the concerns and the issues that have been raised over the last week. Thousands of farmers coming into meetings, thousands of farmers ringing the boys on the hotline and ringing ICBF. Our phones and your phones are red here with guys ringing, right? We have to deal with those issues. The Minister has to address those issues. We have to have more flexibility, and hopefully we'll get that from the Minister, and people will be the fear factor in terms of applying for this scheme will be removed next week, and people will apply. And I'm encouraged by Gordon saying that there's 8,000 in already. Yeah. We want to get that to 40 or 45,000 guys in there. That's what the Minister said. He wants to maximise the number of suckler farmers that are applying for this scheme. The Minister was very strong in that yesterday, and the money's there. The money is there under the Rural Development Plan. Ireland worked very hard to get it. We need to get that out on farms.
And any additional money required, if there is a surge, Kevin, no doubt will be found from somewhere.
There's 500 and something million in the Rural Development Package. Money isn't the issue here. Money isn't the issue here in terms of suckler farmers. And hopefully, and as you know, we have a proposal there to try and increase the level of payment to suckler farmers. I mean, it's important to make the point, Justin. 24 out of the member states across Europe are coupling suckler cows. The French are putting in a payment of €178 per suckler cow. That, unfortunately, that's the route we should have went down. We didn't. We're now in this. Let's try and get the applications in. We have to have more flexibility to make this scheme work for suckler farmers. It needs to be a success.
Brendan, obviously the buck stops with you in the department in a lot of this scheme. You've heard Kevin, you've heard some of the questions we've been asked here. Actually, there's one just come in there earlier on, and it fits in well. The reliability of the 4 and 5 star bulls, e.g. low reliability compared to a guy that's a 3-star bull with high reliability. Is there going to be any concessions around that 3 versus 4 and 5, or what are we going to see?
Well, I think a couple of very important points to make, I think. The first is that there clearly is a degree of concern out there. In part fueled by misunderstanding of the terms and conditions, and I think that's clear over the last day. The Minister moved to clarify a number of issues yesterday, and we'll continue to do that and engage with potential applicants. The second thing is, by sending in an application form, you're not committing to anything. You'll have an opportunity to pull out. That's the second thing. The third thing, Kevin and I could have a long discussion on coupling, but people have to understand what coupling means.
I suppose that boat has left, so I'm just keen on time, Brendan. We might hold that for the next editors.
It means using money from the existing pot and requiring people to do something extra to get the money.
That's where the French...
That's what coupling means. Yeah. Now, we didn't go down the coupling route, but we have negotiated a significant package for suckler farmers, and there's been a lot of talk about dairy this year and suggestions that they're the priority. A big package for suckler farmers. It is not just an income support package. It's something that's designed to improve the suckler herd based on the best information we have from the best geneticists and scientists in the country, and to make a real difference to farmer profitability. That's what this is about. So I would urge people to join this scheme and engage with it, because I think it will make a real difference to the suckler herd.
And I think ultimately it's a case of informing yourself with the facts. And Kevin, your IFA in Leitrim kicked off with a very successful meeting, was it last Friday? And they're continuing on this over the next week. And obviously farmers get out there, get them. We'll be covering it in the Farmers Journal extensively. But I think, Brendan, the key there is that farmers do go into this scheme, they apply, and subsequently if they get the information, Andrew, that you're going to send out to them or on land area, whether it be, they can at least make a decision then. If they don't apply, they can't make the decision. Just guys, before I finish up, there was an indication 3-year review.
Well, with all rural development programs, there's a
midterm review, not 3-year
review, which would be in 3 years' time, and this scheme will be no exception. It's a complex business because you have to go into a further negotiation with the inter-service consultation that was involved in the original negotiation. But of course, we will monitor the operation of this program, and if there are adjustments required, we will endeavour to make them.
Andrew, guys, I have quite a few questions here that we're not going to be able to get to just solely from a time point of view. But I will give you the commitment. We will put them to the guys and answer them on farmersjournal.ie, and we'll have various follow-ups to this meeting on farmersjournal.ie and of course in the print product. Ladies and gentlemen, I suppose that concludes our live broadcast for this evening. I hope you found it informative. Our overall aim was to provide you with information from guys that obviously know what they're talking about and are very passionate about it. And I think ultimately want to see farmers in this scheme and want to see it, as you said, Brendan, and sometimes we've been very critical in the journal of it, beef, the suckler cow being on the hind teat in the context of what we're talking about. Look, there is an investment here of €300 million going into the suckler herd. Kevin, you raised a very valid point that farmers are probably going to spend that and more in this scheme, and it has to deliver on that basis. But again, look, not to labour the point, but if you don't sign up by the 29th, next Friday, Gordon, you won't even get the information to be able to see. So get into the scheme, make the decision based on facts, the right information. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to thank my panel here, Brendan, Gordon, Kevin and Andrew, for answering your questions, I think, in fairness, in a very frank and open way, and putting forward the views, Kevin, of the farmers, those thousands of farmers that have come to your meetings. Just if I could finish again, Gordon, your helpline, the number is 076 106 4423 for the call centre, or you can email beefschemes@agriculture.gov.ie, and of course on farmersjournal.ie we'll also be keeping up to date, and every Thursday morning in the print product. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your time and attention. Thank you.